Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm so very happy to be here with you today for two very specific reasons. First and foremost, we're here to introduce Humberto Schubert, that is talking to us directly from Brazil to discuss his book, his some content in his book, Science of Life After Death. And this is part of our series of discussions called Seeds of Knowledge. The second point is that today we mark 1 year anniversary of the foundation of our center. So this is a very special date for me, and we're here celebrating together. But anyways, Humberto, it's so good to have you here. And if you don't know, I know Humberto does, but if you, who's with us today, doesn't know about the organization, we are, as I said, very young, just turned one, so we are toddlers. But the other aspect of beyond being very young is the fact that we are a organization that is 100% virtual. Um, our founding members are based in Brazil, China, Germany, and the US. And we are currently providing study groups, especially in either the Allan Kardec series, The Basic Foundation of Spiritism, also the Psychological series by Joanna de Angelis. We offer lectures in Portuguese and English, and very soon we will be able to also offer work in French and Germany. So with that, I want to really open this opportunity to welcome all your comments, your feedback, because I believe Humberto has provided a little bit of time to answer your questions, your comments. And if you don't know him, let me go ahead and take a moment to introduce him. Um, Umberto is a very active, engaged member of scientific, philosophical, and he embraces all three aspects of spiritism, right, Umberto? And the religious components of what spiritism is. But professionally speaking, he is currently the associate professor at the Department of Philosophy at it's called UFJF, Federal University of Juiz de Fora, in the city of Juiz de Fora in Brazil. He has some very impressive curriculum that includes a postdoctorate internship in science and religion at the University of Oxford in the UK, a doctorate in the science of religion from the University of Juiz de Fora in Brazil. And I cannot pronounce it right, Alberto, the Martin Luther University in Germany. My apologies. In addition of a bachelor's and master's degrees in philosophy from the Federal University of Juiz de Fora. Humberto, as I said, has this amazing curriculum and experience in the fields of philosophy, and he focuses on philosophy of culture, metaphysics, ethics, and religion. So it is with a great honor, great joy that I have you with us today, Humberto, to celebrate our anniversary. And I will go into the backstage and we'll come back when it's time for questions and answers. Thank you so very much.
Well, greetings to everyone. I am the only one that is honored with this kind invitation from Marcia, and I salute everyone in the audience now and in the future in the recorded version of this presentation. I will try to show you some slides. Just a moment. Can you please tell me if it worked?
Hi, Humberto. Yeah, it's working now.
Great.
See you soon. Bye.
Check if it's rolling
Yes,
adequately.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we will talk about certainly controversial subject, but it is also fair to say about this relatively controversial subject that it is not it did not receive the adequate and the necessary amount of care that this sensitive subject actually deserves. Just to start, we have to admit that full and developed and complete science of afterlife obviously does not exist. What we are trying to do in our book on the science of life after death, or on the science of actually the possibility of survival of personality to bodily death, and other aspects and other consequences of this possibility, is to address the subject from an evidential point of view. That is, we want to look at the available evidence, and we wanted to evaluate if that evidence is compelling and persuading, and how strong actually the evidence is. Now, I think that deserves the name of a scientific approach to the subject, although it is also completely understandable that many people will argue that this is not an actual scientific approach, in the sense that we do not have a specific science organized, accepted, and developed to do with the available evidence, to work the available evidence in a specific methodological way that is academically acceptable. So the first questions we can raise about the subject are obviously quite philosophical. Is there evidence, or is it possible to investigate afterlife, or the possibility of survival of personality, consciousness, the spirit, the soul, whatever you may call it, after bodily death? Is there an actual science of that, or how well can the different sciences inform us or help us understanding the possible evidence that we have now? Obviously, I'm sorry. I'm not sure you can hear it, but we have a motorcycle competition in my neighborhood. Well, first of all, the first condition to develop a science or a scientific approach, scientific-like approach to this phenomena, is that nature must help us to some extent. Nature must agree and allow us to develop a science. That means we need specific answers from nature to our experiments and to our inquiry. We also need to develop a very specific method, because one of the main challenges to a scientific approach to afterlife or to survival is that it is, from a philosophical point of view, namely the materialistic philosophical point of view, the issue itself is invalid or contradictory, or it contradicts the scientific mentality. So many authors, many materialistic authors, claimed that such investigation is either useless or even, if not completely useless, it should be disconsidered, not to say prohibited, because it contradicts the scientific mentality. Well, that's a very, I don't have a more elegant word, but that's a very misguided way to put it, because that's actually a philosophical position about the nature of such subject, of such issue. In fact, there is no such thing as an evidence or a type of phenomena that contradicts scientific mentality, because scientific mentality includes being open to new and novel phenomena, and includes the capacity to be surprised, to be taken by surprise by new phenomena. If we close the doors to the possibility of new evidence or new phenomena that contradicts current knowledge, we are actually being anti-scientific. And the only reason to act that way, that is to prohibit or to reject without any further investigation an alleged phenomena or an alleged evidence, is philosophical. Then the only reason for doing this is ideological or philosophical. That has usually something to do with materialism, which is a philosophical position and not a scientific position. Now, the scientific position, no matter how we understand the word in a philosophical sense, involves analyzing the evidence as it presents itself, and not judging what sorts of evidence should or could be acceptable or not based on current knowledge, which would in fact be a dogmatic rejection or a dogmatic prohibition. That's why I mention it as the main obstacle to such a scientific approach to afterlife or to the survival of consciousness. Now, we have a series of ideological reasons to reject or deny these facts, but we invite everyone to be open-minded and to consider them scientifically, that is purely on the merits of its evidential strength. Well, one of the preconditions, or maybe the precondition of an investigation of afterlife, is that we need to have one, that there must be one, and that means also that individuals, persons, subjects, and spirits, if we want to separate them from the physical realm, which is not necessary, but we can do that, survive bodily death. So this is a conceptual necessity of the idea of an afterlife. Well, Kardec asks in the Book of Mediums, are there spirits? That's an interesting question, because he basically formed a philosophy owned or derived from the contact with this so-called spirits. So why is he asking in the beginning of the Book of Mediums if there are spirits? This is a very clever way of starting a book on the subject, because if one rejects the possibility that our minds, our personalities, our consciousness, or our spirits do survive bodily death, there's no point in further investigating the possibility of interactions between these discarnate or disembodied spirits and our minds or our spirits in the physical realm, in earthly realm, or so something similar. But before a scientific investigation of afterlife, we also need sufficient evidence for the survival of personality. We need some clue, some tip from reality, some suggestion from nature that this could be the case. The main mistake that opponents and critics of the idea of afterlife usually make is to associate this investigation with religion. It is not here the place to disqualify the argument and to disconsider the great importance of religions in the investigation and in the cultural emphasis of such phenomena. It is undeniable that religions are formed around this phenomena. But the general idea that religions are invented and there is no empirical ground, then there's no empirical basis for religions, which is a very modern and typical Western mentality and belief. This idea helps boosting the automatic rejection to a scientific investigation of this and similar subjects, because people have the tendency to believe that religion and religious issues are a matter of pure and unjustified, unscientifically supported belief, and therefore it's a matter of another sort of dispute and not of scientific investigation. So we have to remove, or at least we have to deal with this obstacle, with this very, very strong and very deep-rooted mentality in modern Western society that this phenomena do actually not exist, and the only reason to believe in an afterlife is religious belief or religious affiliation. In fact, many researchers and many great philosophers from all time have been developing very, very strong arguments and addressing or pointing to very strong evidence on the contrary, that religions are in fact a byproduct of such phenomena and not the reason or the source of them. Well, we have to generally consider how science works in order to assume such a daring task, such as the task of analyzing the possibility of survival and afterlife. First of all, we have to consider that science and the general scientific methodology and behavior is the search for patterns that allow us to predict the behavior of some natural phenomena. That's very problematic in face of the contemporary humanities, which are prey to relativism and to some extreme culturalistic dogmas that lead us to think, or that condition us to think that science are just cultural structure or social structures that mainly have to do with the current sets of beliefs in society. So we have to have this understanding under control. While there is a decent amount of truth in it, it is not all the truth about nature and about how sciences work. Sciences can be absurdly and extremely objective and non-cultural in some sense. And we have to hold that in mind, and we have to hold that naturalistic approach to the phenomena we are dealing with now. So how does science actually work to find these patterns? They do that through evidence that is sufficient and justified empirical clues. If we were talking about 100 or 200 years ago, we would like to say proof or demonstration, or we would use the word fact in a very deterministic way, in a stronger sense. But now, because of the social criticism and the cultural criticism on the sciences, we would prefer to use terms, more humble terms like clues. But yes, the evidence calls us to consider some pattern occurring in nature, some pattern that we can identify in nature in a very specific way. So evidence is also what helps us falsifying a scientific theory by showing us something new about the patterns we are studying and proving our theories wrong. So one way to avoid and to protect ourselves from cultural bias or social bias is to remain in contact, to preserve our contact with evidence, and to remain open to be surprised, to see something that contradicts our current beliefs. So evidence is not only a source of confirmation, but it is also a sort of rejection of certain theories and beliefs. And if we don't have that in mind, we will never move from a current rejection of a possible scientific approach to afterlife to the consideration of it. Finally, there is one typical enemy to the whole process of enlightenment through science, which is pseudoscience, which blocks the way to falsification and is more based on the interpretation of evidence than on evidence itself. Well, we could mention, for example, ideologies and other sets of beliefs that do not have much to do with evidence, but which theories block our access to the evidence in a very in a very philosophical way. Well, that's the reason why an anthropological approach to spiritual, religious, or psychic phenomena can limit the narratives to the realm of culture. That is symbolism, interpretation, metaphors. I am quite sure that you saw a lot of that in supposedly scientific discourses on religion and religious experiences and spiritual experiences. But if it was true, this approach should, or they would have to prove scientifically which is the source and what is the source of such supposed symbolism, metaphors, and and ungrounded, unjustified beliefs. But most of the materialistic approaches to religion and to spirituality, they are actually anthropological and not scientific. A scientific approach to world religions and spirituality would involve, or would have to involve, a naturalistic, and I would like to stress that word, a naturalistic look for discernible patterns across cultures. One way to tell if something is cultural or not is to check if it happens in absolutely all cultures, such as the concept of an afterlife, or the concept of spiritual experiences and religious experiences. So a product of a specific culture is very specific and usually does not occur in other cultures without the similar basis and the similar cultural development. But a pattern that is very consistent across cultures is a good candidate to be a pattern in nature and not in culture. Well, fortunately for people interested in a scientific approach to afterlife or the survival possibility, the phenomena insist against our cultural prejudice in presenting themselves with remarkable cross-cultural consistency. There is pretty much no culture absent of religious beliefs and the belief that afterlife, for example, is a concept based on experience. We will never find one single culture that claims anything different from that, because even when they have the concept of revelation, for example, when they are not animistic and they have this concept of organized religion and revelation, they are pointing to revelation as an experience, as a fact, as something that changed the way we understand reality and nature, based on a significant leader or spiritual master that had or could produce sometimes very diverse phenomena that contribute to these beliefs. Well, we have some suggestive evidence that afterlife is the case. One of such suggestive evidence is what we call mediumship, that is, narratives of apparitions, dreams, visions, and encounters with the deceased. We could group all of that, or all these different sorts of phenomena, under the general category of mediumship, which is now very worldwide spread. In the past, we had specific terms for non-Western cultures, such as shamanism and indigenous, trance, many attempts to differentiate mediumship. Or even in the West, we had terms such as clairvoyance or sensitivity, parapsychological terms, and so and so. But now mediumship has been gaining terrain, has been advancing as the preferred and cross-cultural term to describe this sort of trance-like phenomena. And we have book titles in China, Korea, or Japan that consistently use the term mediumship in native Chinese or in Taoist text, and so, proving that the general conception of the phenomena is consistent with the idea of an universal procedure, process, or working process of such phenomena. The strain of such evidence is in the fact that it happens in all cultures without exception. There is no non-mediumistic culture. It is very consistent across cultures. Sorry for the small mistakes in typing. And we have some very epistemically challenging cases, such as those produced by the mediums Leonore Piper in the US, I think in Boston area, and Chico Xavier, whose birthday we are celebrating today in Brazil. These are considered worldwide, in a very general sense, the most remarkable mediums of all time, possibly. And they produce some very specific and very scientifically or epistemically challenging cases. That is, cases that are very difficult to explain away through other sorts of explanations, such as cultural, fraud, psychological explanations. We also have related cases of past life memories, which are very tricky and very interesting. In general, this is not very strong evidence, or not as strong as the evidence provided by mediumship and near-death experiences. But we should never disregard evidence because it is not strong or because it's weak, because weak evidence still suggests something that we do not know about the patterns in nature and that demand further investigation. So it is interesting in this phenomena that it happens in a very early age, and also consistent across cultures, and also in some cases very epistemically challenging. For example, when very, very young children in an atheist or materialistic family claim at the age of 2 and 3 years old, they claim to have very specific memories that include names, addresses, and adult life information about companies and specificities of work or war that are very, very unlikely to be developed by very, very young children. The specialists, the researchers in that field, in that kind of phenomena, they have a very large collection of such cases, again, across cultures, and in Europe as in India, in Middle East as in the US, in Brazil as in East Asia. And finally, we have the out-of-body experiences, and the most famous category or subtype of out-of-body experiences, the near-death experiences, which are out-of-body experiences that happen during cardiac arrest or during clinical death. So this is very, very strong evidence, contrary to the memories of a past life. It is very widely accepted by scientists and philosophers and specialists in science, like philosophers of science. And again, it is very consistent across cultures. It does not happen in specific niches of a culture or in specific cultures. It is also very epistemically challenging because you have no brain function sometimes, and the heart is stopped, and people have very elaborate and very specific narratives about what happened when they were in that condition of clinical death. So this is very daring for a materialistic perspective. And finally, these experiences, they are easier to isolate from fraud or from attempts of fraud compared to mediumship and cases of past memories, which cannot be confirmed in a controlled environment. But near-death experiences always or almost always happen in a controlled environment, in a hospital, in a surgery center, for example, and we can report these cases very scrupulously, very carefully, contrary to cases of mediumship and memories of past life, especially in children, that impose some specific challenges to the controlled to the control of the environment. So I would like to stop my presentation here and invite you to stop presentation and invite you to check the book if you're more interested, and invite possible researchers to consider investigating this subject more closely.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Humberto. This is intriguing, right? And we can spend hours and hours just on your first slides, on your first questions. I love that idea that if you continue to research and give that scientific proof of or evidence that life after death exists, using a materialistic viewpoint and outdated, if you think about it, methodology, it in itself does not, it cannot go forth because it's a new paradigm, right? But
Exactly.
so it's a methodological question, a philosophical and methodological question itself, right?
Exactly. We do not claim, for example, that there is a final answer to such a complex and mostly philosophical problem. In fact, I'm a philosopher. I'm not a scientist. I dedicate myself mainly to metaphysical ideas and issues. But if a question is in essence a philosophical question, it is quite possible that it will never find a final solution. It will never reach a closure. But if some aspects of this problem can be competently addressed by scientific research, so we have to keep our philosophical skepticism under control and to check the evidence and to consider what kind of implications the evidence may suggest.
Yeah, we have a question here, and I think it's very appropriate for us in this discussion, right? Where I think it cut off the last word. My apologies. So it says here, in Spiritism, we share the belief in the afterlife, and as a result, this knowledge helps us better understand our present life. So I guess there's a sense of consoling and comforting aspect to just the belief, right? What can we say to those who are suffering greatly? And I'm thinking here, Humberto, about those in approaching end of life. And what I'm talking about is either with a terminal disease or somebody who is very in their years, is getting to a point where their bodies are just failing and they're approaching death, but they're dealing with that uncertainty. Is there life after death? What have I done? And all the interesting, maybe even interesting research that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross has done, right? For those that were dying, where they go through this grieving process to until the point that they accept. Maybe we can talk a little bit about it. right?
Yeah, it's a vast and entirely new area. I did not consider in my presentation,
Mm-hmm.
which involve the consequences of such convictions. I would prefer the word convictions than belief,
Mm-hmm.
because of course everything we hold is in a sense a belief, but the word belief is viciously and negatively associated with a random opinion or a
Mm-hmm.
random position about something which is not necessarily justified or based on strong evidence, for example, or on good philosophical arguments.
Mm-hmm.
So I would prefer to ask if spiritism or spiritualism in general or religions in general,
Mm-hmm.
they provide sufficient and persuasive means to ground a conviction,
Mm-hmm.
to ground a confidence in
Mm-hmm.
such ideas and beliefs, to remember and to stress that believing is sometimes inconsequent. And we when we analyze the life and the ideas of Plato
Mm-hmm.
or Immanuel Kant or the spiritual masters such as Buddha or Jesus or Zoroaster, it does
Mm-hmm.
not seem to be the case that these people are inconsequent and they are just talking about their personal convictions. I
Mm-hmm.
think they are always both philosophers and spiritual masters. They are trying to root out the ground of these experiences and the ground and the basis for believing in an afterlife or in the consequences of our moral actions, for example. Now, we have specific scientific research, which is probably more developed than the scientific research on afterlife or the
Mm-hmm.
possibility of survival, on the idea of consequences and the, the the implications of such beliefs in practical life. In fact, nowadays we have very strong evidence that the implications on mental health, for example, are dramatic and more intense than any other factor. So we have one very famous researcher in the field, which is Tyler van der Wiel in the University of Harvard, that is a mathematician that works with the
Mm-hmm.
statistics of epidemiology, all causes of mortality and
Mm-hmm.
mental health. And he found some very strong correlation in very broad collections and research synthesis of many papers on this subject. And they found very strong correlation between uh, an actual and engaged spiritual life
Mm-hmm.
and the prevention of mental disease and even physical causes of mortality, such as cardiac diseases,
Mm-hmm.
kidney diseases, cancer, all sorts of mortality. So it is not to say that religious experiences and spirituality magically prevent us from having these problems, but there seems to be a deeper connection between these practices, maybe in the moral level, maybe in a behavioral or social level. So whatever it is, or maybe if it's a multi variable, multi-factor influence, something works in a beneficial way in spiritual experiences. Something is creating a life environment that is more healthy, is healthier than pessimistic beliefs, for example, or self-destructive behavior, which spiritual life and active spiritual life helps preventing.
Yeah. So let me try to summarize it from my understanding of your answer, right? So the question is, if you have a conviction that you said in the afterlife that helps you be grounded in your day to day, right? Where life, whatever it is going through, it gives that grounding necessary to help you survive and thrive in life. For those that do not, and they have to confront the uncertainty, pessimistic or not, but just this uncertainty, I don't know that I will survive. Therefore, it can lead to many other consequences, to include that the physical, like you said in the study, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very interesting because one helps the other versus the other one dilutes or takes away your ability, your strength to keep going, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
also try to remember my students in the class
Yeah.
that ideas the ultimate source of everything we actually do,
Mhm.
and all parts of our behavior are influenced by our ideas.
Yeah.
So it is wrong to think and to say that this is only an idea, so we that there's no practical consequence. But prejudice and racism or sexism is just an idea.
Yeah.
It is just in the mind of some specific persons with very, very strong consequences to their behavior. So Nazism, for example, is just an idea. It's not a practical thing. It is an ideology
Hmm.
that leads people to practical behavior, to concrete behavior. So Stalinism or
No,
Maoism.
I love the idea. And I go to the Nazis and Hitler is a good example, right? We're talking about
Mhm.
Stalin, et cetera, et cetera. But I pause here because Hitler is, for many, recognized as the expression of evil in the 20th century, right? It's like it's
Mhm.
evil. And if we look at it, not really, right? He just was protecting his nation, his belief systems, his ideologies, etc., etc.
As everyone else,
Right, right. So it's very
as
interesting.
yeah, as
What?
everyone else, he was just trying to emphasize and protect his way of understanding the world.
Yeah.
So his ideology, and
Hmm.
that's the same for Stalin, or that's the same for a
Yeah.
terrorist leader. They are persuaded that they are doing the right thing. So it is crucial in our life that
Hmm.
we carefully choose our ideas, and
Yes.
that we treat ideas as the ultimate source of our character, behavior, and feelings about reality. If you cultivate prejudice, for example, that basically means that your ideas about the value of this and that person, they should lead you to treat them differently, and they should lead you to feel differently. And we see that now in political extremism all the time, in all parts of the spectrum. People are very excited to pick a fight and to blame each other as the devil,
Yeah.
uh, and they are very emotional about that, and it influences their practical life a lot. But the ultimate source of that emotions and that behaviors is a belief, a theory, a perspective, an idea that conditions the entire mentality of the subject.
Can we put another wrinkle to this before we go to our next question? But the next wrinkle would be, so we talked about that idea that is leading someone passionately sometimes, right, to
Mhm.
defend a cause. And I love it because right now in our this decade, it seems that activism, social activism, is creating a lot of strength, which signals moving away from being apathetic toward
Mhm.
the hurt. Therefore, I am actively engaged in a cause that I'm going to protect, with the danger that we're talking right now that, hey, what about, is this ideology, is this cause, if you will, really the best way for you to spend your energy?
Yeah,
Right? And then if we
exactly.
think in terms, the other aspect here, Humberto, which is if you believe, and I do, in life after life or life after death, in what you proposed in the beginning, the continuation of your consciousness, right? And
Hmm.
if today, for example, I am Hitler and I am today very passionately acting upon what I believe is this truth, and I will do whatever is in my power to continue the truth. And if my body dies and I move on to come back, does that beliefs or commitments or ideology permeates with you, and as such, now we're doing a little bit of a multiverse here. Let's pretend now I'm back to 200 years and come back to now to today, and I
Mm.
bring all of this with me in and I express them through my opinions and my very prejudiced, perhaps, way of continue. So this is a very interesting way to think about what's going on today and how I'm talking about societally speaking, trends and behaviors may reflect a past time, right? A past life or past zeitgeist.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting to consider it from a philosophical perspective,
Hmm.
because God would then give us a much broader window, a
Hmm.
much broader spectrum of opportunity to develop our talents and to foster and to make us flourish in very different ways. While the notion of determinism, or the notion of a very, very limited life spectrum, which is an idea,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
would give us a sadder and a more pessimistic view about our lives.
Yes.
So much of our moral life is based on how broad is our perspective, how broad is our capacity to consider life as a whole,
Hmm.
as something meaningful,
Hmm.
and that contains purpose that is specific to every and each of us as a human being or a child of God. Né?
Yeah.
I'm not indulging in religious perspectives, but I
Uh-huh.
like the metaphors because they are very rich, and they are they were developed for a very long time to reflect the wisdom of
Hmm.
these changes in perspective and
Yeah.
these changes in mentality. So, as you say, I believe that the intensity
Yes.
of the moral change, the change in character, the change in personality, and the change in behavior and in existential life, this intensity is linked to the ultimate difference between ideas that may be
Mm-hmm.
encouraging or
Yeah.
depressing. And nowadays, in the youth, for example, we see many depressing ideas that are not identified as the source of actual depressing feelings,
Interesting.
and it has a very obvious consequence to behavior, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And many people fail to identify this link between pessimistic ideas and deterministic ideas and materialistic ideas
Mm-hmm.
that tell you that life is not in your hands, that you
Mm-hmm.
cannot improve, that you cannot change for better, that no one loves you. Actually, the life is uh, a wolf pit where everyone is trying to take advantage on you. And people fail to see the direct consequences to these ideas
Mm-hmm.
in the general mood of
Mm-hmm.
our society. But
Yeah.
I'm also very optimistic. It may maybe not be the first impression I give, but as you, I believe that most of the changes we experience, they they are occasion and opportunity to grow and
Mm-hmm.
to mature individuals and societies.
Very good. I think we have time for one more question looking here. And I think you may like this one. Almost every major religion across the world has a defined belief on what happens. And I don't know if you want to call it belief, right?
Okay.
On what happens when you die. So this has become a religious matter. You mentioned that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Would the scientific community better would the scientific community be better positioned to not bring predisposed belief to the science of life after death?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the way we understand religion is
Hmm.
quite associated with something that should be unreflected.
Right.
And some people are very afraid to question and to reflect on their religious beliefs, and that prevents them to improve them and to select which of these beliefs are better or better grounded and justified in reality.
Hmm.
So because sometimes religious traditions actually blame people, or they urge people not to question the essential dogmas and the
Yes.
essential sets of beliefs, as it was an act of heresy or
Hmm.
lack of faith and
Hmm.
something like that. And that's why modern times I do not see them as degeneration or corruption of the spiritual life of the people,
Hmm.
but as an opportunity to further and further uh, invite our consciousness to reflect on the real nature of the spiritual life, because we can only grow from that process, with that process.
Absolutely.
That would be a process very similar to a scientific approach to
Uh-huh.
these issues.
Uh-huh.
So I think that in our book, for example, but also in general debate like we are doing now, we can help people to consider that science and religious life or spiritual life are not in conflict, or there is no essential contradiction between them, as
Mhm.
long as we can open the dialogue between what religious traditions are talking about and what they are telling us about this phenomena, and what our improved and better observations nowadays can tell us, inform us about the same phenomena.
Very good. I think we're reaching time here, Humberto, but I wanted to maybe give you a minute or so for you to speak about. So when was the book written? When was it published? What maybe any positive or negative reviews, and why, if you want to say that before we conclude with a prayer, and I would love for you to do that.
Amazing. Well, the book was released, I believe, in last July, I think.
Mhm.
And so far, it has received only positive reviews
Awesome.
from very, very good scientific journals, especially in psychiatry and psychology and medicine in general. I personally would like to see some philosophical reviews,
Mhm.
but I'm happy to acknowledge that we have no main criticism or no great attack against the theories we developed there. Um,
And the
well,
book was, sorry, the book was written in English or translated into
yes.
English? So it was
The book
written.
was written
Mhm,
in English. We had
mhm,
some help reviewing it by
mhm,
a native speaker, but
mhm.
it was our intention to offer it to the widest possible public.
Awesome. This is very good. Thank you. So if you want to do some final remark and close with a prayer, I would appreciate. And I want to say thank you. Thank you, Humberto. Thank you, everyone who's been with us for the past year, past 12 months, as we move on to keep on our commitment to our our work. So thank you, Humberto.
Thank you. Well, I invite you to think philosophically about the main issues related to a prayer. Um, there's a philosopher I like much, Christian Wolff. He was an Enlightenment philosopher who say that the idea of glory is linked to the recognition that things are good and they are adequate and they are in the place they are meant to be. I think that's a very beautiful description of such idea. And he described the idea of worship as the deepest recognition to the source of being, to the source of reality, that we we have an attitude of gratitude to what we received, to what we are in an undeservedly way. So I would like to thank you, God, the source of being, the source of reality, to everything that we enjoy in life and that we enjoy as a life. And I would like to foment and to foster the notion of your beauty and your glory in creation and in nature in every heart. So be it. Amen.
So be it. Thank you, everyone.